In the autumn of 1907, the United States was hours away from total economic collapse. Yet the savior of the entire global financial system was not the president, nor the Treasury. It was a single private banker operating from a mahogany desk in New York City. To understand the sheer magnitude of this crisis, we must expose the terrifying paradox of early American capitalism. The nation possessed the largest industrial output on Earth, but operated completely without a central bank to print emergency money or bail out failing institutions. When a wildly speculative scheme to corner the market on copper stocks catastrophically failed in October 1907, public panic erupted instantly. Depositors rushed to regional banks, demanding their physical cash back before the vaults ran completely dry. Trust companies, shadowy, unregulated financial institutions holding billions in public savings, began to topple like dominoes one by one. But the real masterstroke wasn't just the failing banks, it was the contagion spreading rapidly to healthy institutions across the entire continent. With the federal government paralyzed and unwilling to intervene, terrified financial elites looked across Wall Street and realized an uncomfortable truth. There was only one man wealthy enough, ruthless enough, and respected enough to command the entire financial universe. Enter John Pierpont Morgan. At 69 years old, he was already semi-retired, collecting priceless Renaissance art and sailing his luxurious yacht across the Atlantic. But destiny, and his own massive self-interest, called him back to the battlefield. Morgan did not hold a public office, but his private banking house wielded more influence than the entire United States Congress combined. He controlled the railroads, the steel mills, and the transatlantic shipping lanes that made global commerce possible. Instead of panicking like the politicians in Washington, Morgan locked the doors of his grand library on Madison Avenue and summoned the wealthiest titans of American industry. These were bitter, cutthroat rivals who would normally rather destroy each other than cooperate. Imagine the sheer psychological tension inside that opulent room, as Morgan calmly smoked his thick cigar while waiting for his terrified rivals to arrive. But the secret weapon he held wasn't just his own fortune, it was a ruthless ultimatum. He forced the heads of the competing New York trust companies into a literal hostage negotiation, locking the heavy oak doors from the inside and pocketing the key. They were told they could not leave until they pledged millions of their own capital to save the system. Hours bled into the deep hours of the night, with billions of dollars hanging by a fragile thread of personal trust and sheer intimidation. Yet just as agreement seemed near, the biggest financial institution in the city threatened to walk away from the table. Morgan stepped forward, slammed his fist on the mahogany table, and made it clear, if they did not fund the rescue, the entire American economy would burn to ash. They finally signed at dawn, averting total immediate catastrophe. However, stopping the bank runs was only half the battle, because the New York Stock Exchange itself was about to run completely out of cash within minutes. If the stock exchange closed, every single corporation in America would instantly default on their payrolls. Morgan calmly summoned the president of the stock exchange to his library and demanded an immediate accounting of every single dollar needed to keep trading alive. The number was astronomical, millions of dollars in cash that simply did not exist anywhere in the open market. With the entire financial world watching in breathless anticipation, Morgan orchestrated the final, most audacious liquidity injection in human history, proving that private centralization could conquer public chaos. He gathered the city's top bank presidents once more, practically ordering them to pool their cash reserves into a centralized emergency fund controlled entirely by him. Within minutes, $25 million was raised to keep the trading floor open. But even that monumental sum was not enough to satisfy the bleeding wounds of the New York financial district, forcing Morgan to execute a brilliant psychological masterstroke. He convinced the city's religious leaders to preach calm from their pulpits on Sunday morning. By weaponizing public faith and projecting absolute unshakable confidence, Morgan halted the panic before Monday morning trading bells could ring across the financial district. The terrified crowd standing outside closed banks slowly dispersed back to their homes. Yet behind the scenes, the savior of America extracted a monumental price for his services, orchestrating corporate mergers that cemented his absolute monopoly over American industry. As part of the bailout terms, Morgan engineered the emergency acquisition of the Tennessee Coal, Iron, and Railroad Company by his giant conglomerate, U.S. Steel. This eliminated a major competitor in broad daylight under the guise of public rescue. President Theodore Roosevelt, a fierce trust buster who usually despised corporate monopolies, was forced to look the other way and personally approve the anti-competitive merger to prevent total national economic ruin. This terrifying concentration of financial power in the hands of one unelected mortal sparked a massive national backlash that forever changed the trajectory of American banking and monetary policy. Politicians realized with absolute horror that the survival of the United States economy depended entirely on the benevolence and financial health of a single private citizen on Wall Street. To ensure this near-death experience never happened again, Congress secretly planned a revolutionary legislative maneuver that would strip private bankers of their ultimate emergency powers forever. Just 6 years later, in December 1913, the United States government officially created the Federal Reserve System, acting as the permanent central bank modeled directly on J.P. Morgan's private bailout playbook. The irony of modern finance is profound. The institution created to destroy Wall Street dominance was actually engineered using the exact crisis management tactics perfected by J.P. Morgan himself. Today, every time central banks print emergency money during a modern market crash or bail out massive investment firms, they are simply executing J.P. Morgan's 1907 playbook on a global digital scale. Understanding this hidden history reveals the true architecture of modern wealth. Sovereign governments often act merely as a safety net for private financial empires when their high-stakes bets go catastrophically wrong. So the next time you hear about emergency interest rate cuts or multi-billion-dollar corporate bailouts on the evening news, remember that the rules of the game were written in a dark New York library over a century ago. History does not always repeat itself, but in the halls of corporate power, the master strokes of ruthless billionaires continue to shape your wallet, your savings, and your financial future every single day.